Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Duger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. I'm so excited. Today we have Alyssa Brade, who's a passionate advocate for maternal mental health and is dedicated to sharing authentic solutions tailored to the parenting realities of many mothers. Drawing from her personal experience, her master's degree in English, degrees in anthropology, linguistics, and communication, and years of multidisciplinary research, Alyssa brings her discoveries and firsthand knowledge in support of modern motherhood. She's the author of Mommy Needs a Minute, From Burnout to Empowerment, which was just released in May 2024, congratulations, and is geared towards modern moms who may feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, and undersupported. So welcome, Alyssa. I'm so pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share with you.
So your journey of becoming a millennial mom wasn't an especially easy one. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey and what that looked like for you and how it might have inspired the book that you wrote?
Of course, I was very much career-oriented. I was in the middle of a master's degree program at the time, was told I would never be able to have children, or if I did, I would need a lot of medical intervention in order to have them. It was completely okay with me. I never wanted kids. I was happy. A couple months into my master's degree program, found out I was unexpectedly pregnant. And then a couple weeks after that, COVID exploded in the early part of 2020. So it felt like my own inner world had exploded, and then the outer world was also exploding around me. It was very chaotic. I ended up finishing my master's degree, giving birth to my first son. I realized that at that point, there was such a lack of maternal support. I ended up giving birth, and a couple hours after giving birth, I was grading papers because I taught English at the university at the time. And I was also doing my own work because the rest of the world doesn't stop just because you have a baby, even though your body and your mental state has just undergone this massive change. A week after my birth, my husband ended up going and getting a vasectomy because we were like, we weren't planning on having kids. One and done. A couple months after that vasectomy, we found out I was pregnant again. So I was only 4 months postpartum, found out I was pregnant again, and I was a couple months away from finishing my master's degree. Finished my master's degree, and I had gotten a job, was really excited, was working from home, newly pregnant, 5-month-old. And a couple months into my pregnancy, I was really sick, overwhelmed, exhausted, trying to do it all. I was trying to be the stay-at-home mom and a career mom and be everything for my kid, everything for my husband, and everything for my job. And it was too much. I wasn't really sleeping. I ended up just carrying my little guy down the stairs, and I ended up fainting while I was carrying him down our cement stairs. He fell and hit his head, ended up having a traumatic brain injury. And when we took him to our local hospital, they helicoptered him to a larger hospital. And they told us that chances were very high that he was going to die. And then they also told us that if he did live, that he would never live a full life. And it was, of course, as a mom, very traumatic, heartbreaking. There was so many emotions of guilt and judgment and what was wrong with me. How could I have let this happen? And a lot of shame associated with that of what kind of mother am I? I felt like maybe I was being punished because I hadn't wanted to be a mom originally. It was a lot. It was a really hard time. And after that, I took a little bit of time, took a step back. And after we got to the hospital, the doctor did an MRI scan, and he said miraculously the bleeding in his brain had stopped and he was going to be just fine. We've taken him to specialists since. He's hitting all his developmental milestones. He's 3.5 and he's wonderful. And he is living a completely full and normal, healthy life. But that was the wake-up call I needed to realize what was going on in our society, what was going on in me personally, that I was literally willing to work myself to the point of exhaustion and burnout that I was fainting while trying to take care of my child. And then, in addition, why was I feeling this pressure to keep performing? So I started doing some research into what was leading not just me, but other women to feel these unmeasurable, unmeetable expectations. Enough was never enough, and good enough was never good enough. And it was these expectations I felt so heavy on myself. And all the women that I chatted with were also feeling that pressure. And I was like, is this a social thing? Is this an intrinsic part of being a woman? Is you feel guilty for never doing enough? And that's how the book started to come to be. And I began to do research from a place of really complete burnout and brokenness in my own life. That I was like, this can't be all that there is to motherhood. And this can't be my life. I refuse to let this state of exhaustion and burnout and overwhelming guilt be the state of my mental health for the rest of my time parenting.
So super stressful entryhood, especially not expecting to be a parent ever, and then being invited into being a parent twice and being so overwhelmed that you passed out and had a very traumatic experience with your children. And I'm so glad everything turned out well. And in your research, what were some of the challenges that you learned about that were especially sobering for you?
A lot of it came down to women's self worth. A lot of the time, we equate our self worth with how much we perform and how much we do for others. And I feel like that's such a deep part of motherhood. We evaluate ourselves by how well we perform, and we compare ourselves a lot with how other people appear to be performing. And with social media, especially in our current day and age, it paints such a one-way picture of how well we're doing or how great we're doing and being it all for everybody. We are making a ton of money from home, or we have a successful business, or we're advancing in our own careers, but we also show up for everything. We're the chair of the bake sale and we're managing to do it all. And then those of us who feel overwhelmed and inadequate trying to do it all don't feel comfortable sharing that because somehow we must have missed the mark. It must be something wrong with us, not something wrong with our society. And instead of evaluating what's going on in our society that's making us feel this way, we instead internalize and push harder and dig deeper. And we're inauthentic when we talk to other moms, and we're inauthentic when we even talk with ourselves. And I think a big part of what I found when I wrote this book is many women lose themselves. We don't know who we are outside of our children, outside of our careers, outside of all of these definitions that we've given ourselves, to the point where many women I talk to, they don't even know what they like, what they don't like, who they are, what their dreams and hopes and aspirations for the future are. And I think the great tragedy in that is when we lose ourselves, our children and our spouses and the people who love us also lose us. And they are missing out on that authentic version of you. And I think that's one of the greatest tragedies facing many modern mothers in our day and age right now.
And just to piggyback on that, when we initially spoke, you talked a little bit about the previous generations of mothers and what they were maybe navigating and how that maybe impacts. I'm older than a millennial, but myself and future generations after me, all of us are parenting our children a little differently, perhaps because of or in spite of how we were parented. Could you speak a little bit to that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of millennials that I talk to, there's two big things that I noticed. One, we were either raised by moms who were coming off the feminist train, and we were like, have a career, focus on you. The kids will come second, give your all to your career. So there's that message coming in. And then there was also the message of the very traditional mom who was like, we homeschool, we stay home, our woman's place is in the home. I grew up in more of that latter camp of the woman's place is in the home. You are the ones raising your kids. When you have babies, your career goes out the window. Actually, you don't even really need a career. You just need a man to have kids. And I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with those trains of thought. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, that's wonderful. If you want to have a career, that's wonderful. I guarantee you that there are things that you can do that will raise your children to be well-loved and successful individuals, no matter what you choose. I think what happens though is there's that pressure and that conflict coming from both sides. There was no balance that we had demonstrated. It was a lot of either you're full in with the career or you're full in with the kids. And you'll hear women talking about how they regret missing out on their kids. And you hear women who talk about regret missing out on their career. And it felt like there's no balance. There's one or the other. And if you try and do it both, like I was doing, and many women I've talked to have done, you feel like you're failing in all areas of your life because there's just not enough of you to go around all the time. The other thing I noticed was a lot of millennial parents are trying to use a more gentle parenting approach. And that is a beautiful thing. And when done correctly, I believe it's very powerful with your children. What I've seen is because a lot of millennials didn't have that, even Gen Z didn't have a lot of that demonstrated for them in a healthy way. I think what ends up happening a lot of the time is we went from having too much boundaries, too strict boundaries, feelings weren't okay. What you think on a certain situation doesn't matter. And we went a 180 and we're like, there are no boundaries. However you feel, tell me whatever you're feeling. And I think our generation is situated in an interesting position where there's no balance in many aspects of parenting because we're trying to undo what we thought was wrong with our parents. And in doing that, we're throwing out everything like the boundaries. There's no balance between being a stay-at-home mom and a career mom. It's like we're swinging too far each way. And in doing that, we're struggling with our parenting. We're feeling inauthentic in our parenting. We're overwhelmed. We're stressed. And our kids are suffering the side effects of us trying to find our way and bouncing back and forth.
And what do you see as some of the challenges that little ones, either babies or young children or even older children, might be experiencing from parents who are overwhelmed, burned out, isolated, whatever's happening for them?
I think I can speak to a little bit to me personally. I remember it was this overstimulation that I felt all the time, where there was the mom that I wanted to be, the calm, present, Pinterest mom with the beautiful lunches and always there and always had what they needed and always knew what they needed and always conveyed myself and presented myself in a calm, caring, nurturing manner. And then there was the reality of my phone was ringing and my laptop was dinging with all my emails and the kids were crying and there was crumbs on the floor and I was overstimulated and overwhelmed and it was 8 a.m. And there was the ideal mom that I wanted to be and there was the reality that I was living, which was I was burned out, so I was short-tempered and I was angry and I had mood swings and I felt out of control in my own life. Which in turn, I think, impacts our children because they feel that lack of control that you're feeling. And they feel out of control because if mom's out of control, there must be something wrong. I feel out of control. And I think when we don't take time to connect with ourselves and show up authentically for ourselves, we can't show up authentically for our children. We can't demonstrate to them what that looks like. We can't demonstrate to them what healthy boundaries look like. We end up telling our kids that all of these priorities that I have come before you, because you're trying so hard to meet all these different expectations. And a lot of the times what I've found with my boys is they just need me to show up. They need me to be present. They need me to be there. We don't need to be doing anything crazy. It doesn't have to be this elaborate Pinterest craft that took hours and hours of preparation. It can literally be looking at bugs in the front yard for an hour with my phone set off to the side because this is their time and I'm focused on them. And when we're burned out, I think a lot of the times we mistake. I spent time with my kids today, but we miss out on the quality of time, and the quality will always trump the quantity. I could spend 8 hours as a stay-at-home mom with my kids, but if I'm burned out and overwhelmed and depressed and stressed and exhausted, the quality of those 8 hours is not going to make as much of a difference as if I had spent an hour with them of concentrated time from a healthy mental space, because I had taken some of the other hours towards getting the things that I needed to show up well.
That's well said. In this constant lifelong struggle to balance things, I think maybe we set ourselves up with that word, things need to be balanced. Do you feel like there is a way to balance having a career that you enjoy and really showing up for your children?
I think one of the biggest things is choosing the career that you want, that makes you happy, that also is in alignment with what your children and your family need. If you were to tell me that you wanted to go and join the Peace Corps for 6 months and you also wanted to be a really present mom, I tell you, those two visions might not align. And that might be something that you could do later in life, or it might be a vision that you have to let go because now your life has changed. However, I think that when you're working in alignment with all of the different parts of you and all the different parts of your life, then starting to make consistent, committed, imperfect action towards your goal is the most important thing. So if you have a dream of being an entrepreneur and being a stay-at-home mom while also working a small business, consistent, committed, imperfect action is one of the best things that you can do towards working towards your goals. And I would say adopting a little bit of a slow life mentality. I talk about this in my book. Experience more by doing less. You achieve more by doing less. And so instead of having your kids in every single extracurricular activity under the sun, balance. You maybe let them choose one thing at a time, and then you have more time for your career, whatever it is you are trying to pursue. It's important that you then maintain an identity outside of your children. It's important for your children to see that your only job in life isn't to wait on them. But for young women, you want to model that's not their expectation when they grow up and have kids, that they have to give up all of themselves for their children. So model that for them. And if you have young men, you also need to be modeling for them that the expectation isn't that whoever you end up marrying, your spouse, their job isn't to wait on you hand and foot and give everything for you all the time. So I think that in finding that balance, having that committed, consistent, imperfect action, and also reducing the amount of time that you spend doing everything for everyone, your kids, enrolling them in one or two activities that show they're a priority and you care about their growth, but you also care about your own growth. And you also care about putting yourself first too. And they should care about putting themselves first as they grow up. Because you are your star player. And if you don't treat yourself like it, nobody else is going to.
I think it speaks so poignantly to this piece around it's important to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
It's modeling for kids how making mistakes is okay. It's how we learn. And so as parents, particularly maybe as moms, if we're trying to juggle the very focused present parenting with a career that we enjoy with also time for ourselves, messing up sometimes I think is important. And admitting it, like, wow, I really wanted to show up more for you at your soccer game or at your ballet recital. And I was so overwhelmed and so tired because I hadn't taken enough time for myself, or I was overwhelmed with this stuff at work. And being really honest, hey, your parent has a life as a human being outside of their relationship to you, and they were living this life before you came into it. And I feel like part of our job as parents is to really normalize, like you're talking about, how it's important to make those mistakes. It's important to prioritize our own health and well-being, like putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first before we assist someone else. Because if we don't, we end up in some serious trouble sometimes.
And I think that so perfectly said because it's so true. There are moments, even when my little guys too, he would come up to me and he would need something and I was feeling overwhelmed and I would take a deep breath and I'd say to him, buddy, I'm having a really big feeling right now. I need a few minutes to take a few deep breaths and calm down so that I can show up for you the way that I want to. And I would say that to him, even if my husband would laugh at me sometimes because it's going over his head. But I think it that consistently because then now at 3, she'll say to me sometimes, Mama, me need a minute. He goes, me feel really angry in me body. And he'll go, me need a minute to calm down. And I'll see him sit there and he'll breathe. And he'll tell me, taking a minute. And sometimes when he's having a hard time, I say, you're having a big feeling in your body. Do you need to take a minute? And it's like that permission to be like, take a minute. It's okay. I try to model for you that I need a minute sometimes too. And I don't always do everything perfectly. And one of my favorite things that my little guy says to me now at 3.5 is, Mama, me always do me best, but me don't always do it right. And he'll say that to me all the time because he just picked it up because I say it to him all the time. Buddy, I always try my best, but I don't always do it right. And so now he'll say it and he'll say it to his brother and he'll say it to his friends when somebody isn't sharing or he's upset about something or he'll hit with his hands. He'll say, oh, me sorry. Me always try my best, but me don't always do it right. I think that is just so much of him. He's such a great little guy. But I do think that it's such a beautiful reminder of our kids, even at such a young age, they're watching everything we're doing and they're learning how to interact with the world through watching us. And they're learning how to treat themselves through watching how we treat ourselves. So if we think that we're being the perfect mommy martyr by always giving every piece of ourselves to everyone all the time, never taking time for ourselves, we're showing our children that's the goal, that's the expectation that they should model their lives after. And so I love to tell moms, treat yourself like someone you love because the people who love you are watching you to see how to treat themselves.
And so much we know of communication is nonverbal. So if we come into
Yes.
something and we're feeling angry or upset or frustrated inside, and we show up and we paste on that smile and we force our way through it, anyone, child, adult, can feel that normally. And they're like, something doesn't feel right. So it's not about faking it till you make it. It's more about, like you're speaking to, being really authentic about what's happening, sharing what's happening at an age appropriate level, and letting them find their way through it.
Yes, and I think that's one of the best gifts we can give our children. Everybody has emotions. You're responsible for your feelings. Things other people do will affect how you feel, but you're responsible for your feelings. And just because you have a feeling doesn't mean whatever you want to do to act on it is appropriate. But it's okay to acknowledge, I feel this way. I feel upset. I feel angry. I feel hurt. It's okay to feel that way. And then obviously putting in those boundaries, like we talked about, like it's okay that you feel that way, but feeling that way isn't a license to hit your brother, throw a tantrum, throw your food on the ground. It's okay to acknowledge you're feeling that way. And now we're going to take that emotion and do something healthy with it. And it's definitely really hard to do with toddlers, but I think that having children really helped me see all the areas that were broken inside of me that I'm like, I don't want to model this for my children. So I need to start working on this with myself because I don't want them to think that this is normal and I don't want them to think that this behavior is okay.
And I think the beautiful thing that I've learned as a parent with older children now is that if you miss it the first time through in toddlerhood, you get it again in the teen years. So it's a great time to practice and then do it again when they're teenagers and all the stuff is coming up that looks like different kinds of the same behavior as a toddler might have sometimes.
I
But they're able to communicate it sometimes, which is amazing to watch.
That's super encouraging for me, Stephanie, because I've said to my husband, I think I did not handle that and I missed the train. And I hope the train comes back around because I missed it that time.
Yeah, it keeps coming back around, I think. Alyssa, can you share some of the tips that you have for moms who are feeling overwhelmed, burned out, isolated, not having the kind of parenting experience they would like to have in that moment? What are some of your best tips that you give people in your book?
I think one of the biggest things is that the healthier you are within yourself, the better you show up as a parent. You can read a million different parenting books and a million different techniques, and all of them might have a lot of value that you could apply to your own parenting journey. But if you haven't addressed your own mental health baggage, if you haven't discovered who you are and authentically looked at what you want out of your life, your parenting journey is going to be difficult, I believe, because you're not parenting authentically because you don't know who you are in this new role. And I think a lot of times women get thrust into this parenting role and we think it'll be easy. We just absorb it into who we already are. But there's a clear change that happens on a physical, emotional, mental level when we become parents. And I think a lot of women, because of our society, being like, it's no big deal, you had the baby, you're fine. We forget about the mom after the baby's out and all the focus goes on the baby and how you're going to parent, what choices you're going to make to parent well. And the reality is, a lot of women haven't taken the time to mentally be like, who am I in this new role? What is my identity? What do I like? What do I don't like? What do I want? What do I don't want? And we end up consuming tons of information because we don't know who we are. We don't trust our instincting. We don't know what to do with our own child. And we get all this conflicting information. So we get information burnout because we're trying to find the best way to do it and what everybody tells us is the best way, but there is no best way. We get body burnout because we lost the body that we had before. And even after your body looks the same, It's never going to feel the same. There were deep changes that happened, and that's okay. And taking time to that and taking time to love yourself the way you are, and speak kindly to yourself and kindly about your body is huge. Taking time for your mental health. I believe motherhood exasperates all of the mental baggage that we've carried around for years that we haven't been forced to unpack. And now there's motherhood, and the mental baggage is a beautiful display of our dirty laundry, all for the world to see. And our child gets the front row view to it. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is ugly. Where is this coming from? And if you don't take the time to unpack that and address it in healthy ways and start to work through it, your children and consequently you and the people you love the most are going to suffer of not taking that time. There's multiple chapters that talk about multiple different areas of burnout, but those are some of the big ones that I would love to encourage women to do. Finding yourself in this new role, it's not a waste of time. It's not selfish. It's one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself and your family is knowing who you are and what you want outside of what everybody tells you you should want or what motherhood should look like. What do you need motherhood to look like so that you can show up authentically for yourself?
Parenthood is such a huge rite of passage. And I feel like
Yes.
each time there's the first child, and if you have more children after that, it continues to evolve and grow. And I
Yes.
feel like really honoring that rite of passage. And like you said, really getting to know yourself, even if you feel like maybe I'm already a parent, maybe it's too late to get to know myself, right? Like I've had people actually share that with me as a therapist of I should have done it before and now it's too late. I'm like, the train is coming around again. Like you always get that opportunity. And our children are such amazing mirrors for us in terms of how they show us exactly what's up and exactly where we have strengths and where we maybe need to do a little bit of work. And so, what are your thoughts about the best ways for particularly new moms to get to know themselves better, unpack some of their emotional baggage if they haven't already?
First, I want to say I love what you said about it is never too late. The journey of self discovery will last the rest of your life and it will change with all the different seasons. And if you enter into it with that mindset of discovering who I am in this season, and I will discover who I am in the next season, a famous quote, and who said it is escaping me, but the journey inward is the longest journey we'll ever take. If you view it like that, it's never too late. You could be 60, you could be 70, you could be 80, and we're always learning and growing and discovering who we are. One of the biggest things that I feel like women can do as new moms, I love that the psychologist Julia Christina really talks about this quite a bit in her book, Drive Your Own Darn Bus. But one of the concepts I love about it is our emotions don't dictate our reality. And what we're feeling about a certain situation doesn't dictate the truth of a certain situation. So, really discerning what your values are and starting to make authentic choices through a value perspective instead of an emotion perspective. Because in any given day, we feel worthless, judged, overwhelmed, burned out, tired, happy, excited, loved, unloved. And if we're always making impulse decisions based off of those emotions, it's hard to create an authentic version of our lives, authentic version of ourselves, because we're not acting in alignment with our values. We're acting in alignment with our thoughts. And emotions are fickle. The other thing is that I would really encourage people to take a few minutes to write an identity journal. It doesn't have to be a big task. It doesn't have to be something beautiful that you're going to share with the world. It can just be something as simple as, what don't I like? And write it down. No judgment. It's not what anybody tells you shouldn't like. Maybe you don't like going to loud parties. Maybe you don't like loud music. I don't like when my calendar is too full. It makes me feel overwhelmed and stressed. And so I just have to be very deliberate about not overbooking my schedule. And then write down, what is it that makes you happy? What is it that brings you joy? And start to write down a couple of these I am statements. I am a mom. I am also a woman. I am also petite. I am also a little bit of an introvert. I am also a writer. Write down who you are and how you see yourself showing up and start to get in touch with what it is you like and what it is you don't like. Because when we start to make decisions based on what we actually enjoy in our lives, then our life starts to look like a life that we like to live instead of a life that we're living for everybody else.
We've been speaking with Alyssa Brade, and she is the author of Mommy Needs a Minute. Alyssa, can you share with our listeners how to get your new book and how to find out more about you?
You can find me on Instagram at Alyssa Brade Writes. You can also find me on Facebook at Alyssa Brade. And then my book is available on Amazon. There is an Audible version, an ebook version, as well as a paperback version. So something for everybody. I know a lot of busy moms, we don't have time to sit down and concentrate, especially on a nonfiction book. It's nice to have a little bit of an escape at the end of the day. So while you're doing your dishes, while you're going and picking up your kids from daycare, preschool, school, please feel free to just get the Audible book version, pop in a headphone and listen. And I would be so happy to accompany you throughout your day and just encourage and support you. My biggest heart with writing this book was to let other women know that it's okay to be authentic, okay to be vulnerable, and you're not alone. However you're feeling, you're not alone.
Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa. It's been really sweet talking with you.
Thank you. I love chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast, or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.